of us is living today to the fullest, as we would at Sunset Pines. I told the audience I'm shook. It was incredibly profound, incredibly stimulating, thought-provoking. But Chris, let me start with you. I mean, obviously each of these challenges, they're not gimmicks, they are grounded in science, and they took you on a deep adventure. How did it change you overall?
Look, each episode had something very different in it, a different challenge. There were physical challenges, emotional, psychological challenges, as this one was. The reason I wanted to do the show was a deep dive into longevity and live a longer, healthier, better life, and to work with some of the world-renowned experts in that space and come away with hopefully a wealth of knowledge and be armed with the tools to do that was an absolute blessing. This episode in particular was, as you say, profound for many reasons. I'm sitting there in the audience and it was made me think about my family in an even more intense way, and my kids, and making the most of every moment and not taking anything for granted. And I'm incredibly thankful for the experience. It was a one-off indeed, and a beautiful experience.
In this episode, you talk about living in the present, and yet, for those of you who don't have the advantage of seeing other episodes, that is also a theme. Like when you're overcoming stress and your stress coach says, live in the moment. Do you find that that's something that you've been able to apply to the rest of your life?
I try to, yeah. I feel like we can control whatever is right in front of us, or we can deal with it. It's the narrative for something in the past or the future that often scares the hell out of us and becomes overwhelming. It's the narrative that we slap on top of that situation, and the what ifs and the what could haves and so on, as opposed to what we're dealing with right in front of us. And if we stay present more often, and in all these circumstances and situations, it was about not thinking about the outcome. It was just, what have you got right now? And I find it's a much easier space to deal with.
Darren Aronofsky, you have such a fertile brain, right? The host of the Venice Film Festival with The Whale, The Wrestler, The Black Swan. Your IMDb goes on for pages. This was really your brainchild. What made you want to go at this nonfiction storytelling in this way?
Well, it's a long story. It started, I did a little film called The Fountain back in 2006 that dealt with longevity and a man who wanted to live forever. And back then, it was really kind of the realm of science fiction. A lot of the ideas, there was actually this one line where Hugh Jackman says, "Death is a disease, and I will cure it." And we nearly cut it out of the movie because we thought people would laugh at it. Now there's a lot of money and a lot of people really interested in that world. And then many years ago, I got interested. I met Dr. Peter Attia, and we became really good friends. And he was sort of on the cutting edge of thinking about this science and really studying it and understanding it and invoking it in the world and bringing it forward. And we just kept talking about it, and I felt it became time that it was finally something that a lot of people would be interested. And then we made a call to NatGeo, and they got the idea pretty quickly. And then Chris was the next sort of passenger on the train.
Dr. T, I want you to raise your hand because I'm going to skip down to you in the blue shirt, right jacket rather. You're a longevity physician. I understand you also do some extreme sports like swimming from Maui to Lanai and then back.
Catalina to LA, right? Or did you do Maui too?
There's a little nodding going, yeah. He took Chris through shock, through fasting, through strength exercises. Tell me why the fasting, 4 days of it, and what did this guy learn from that?
He learned a lot. I think he learned about what he could do because, Chris wasn't really prepared for that. It wasn't like he was told in advance he's going to have to do this. He sort of found out in real time on the screen the way people watching it would find out. You know, fasting is a huge physiologic challenge, and it's really not something that everybody could or even should do. But somebody in Chris's state of health, we thought it was something that we could do to really kind of push the boundaries of what, you know, regeneration could look like. And as unnatural as fasting might seem to us in our environment of obviously endless and plentiful food, it's actually kind of a process that is so prevalent in nature and in evolution, in our evolution, that our body has remarkable adaptations to it. And it does some actually pretty powerful things to the body. And we wanted to kind of probe that with Chris.
And Chris, you've been quoted as saying that that was the hardest challenge. Is that true?
Yeah, you asked me what I learned from it. I learned that I loved food. That I didn't want to fast ever again.
And yet, was it in fact the most challenging? I mean, you did some serious
Badass
badass stuff.
They're all challenging in different ways.
Yeah.
The ice swim that I did with Ross Edgley down the end there was pretty excruciating and painful.
Right. And for the Americans, that was ice swim. Yeah.
Oh, see.
Ross, we're going to skip down to you because Chris brought you in. Ross has done things like run marathons with a 3,000-ton truck behind him and swum around Great Britain, and I mean all the way around Great Britain. Why the shop? Why take Chris and his brothers into the Arctic dip? What was the point of that?
Well, when you say it like that, yeah.
Sorry, I
Seems like
meant that in
terrible.
only the most admirable way.
No, so it was, I think, I love philosophy, so studying ancient Greek philosophy. Epictetus had this wonderful phrase, and it was getting winter. They thought that wars were fought in the summer, but what you did in the winter had a profound impact on what you'd be able to perform in the summer. So it was just this idea of cold miles, basically. And I think when Chris, also as well, I mean, worth noting is when people do ice swims, they bulk up, they train for years, they put on body fat's insulating, it's good. Chris had none. Like, it was terrible in terms of his physiology. But on 5 days training, it just, for me, having studied sports science now for 20 years, Chris basically just rewrote the rules of ice swimming as we understood it, doing it on single-digit body fat on 5 days. And yeah, towards the end, I was just less of a coach and just more of a spectator, and it was just amazing what I got to witness.
What I love, Chris, is seeing your loved ones, your friends, your lifelong friends, and your family come along on these adventures, and it spoke to some of the relationships that we know is important in this kind of longevity study. Was that a conscious choice, or just like, hey, I want to bring my loved ones?
Well, it was crafted by the team to bring them along, but I think a lot of the blue zones where they have, that have the most centurions in the community, a lot of it is about people having, dietary differences to the rest of the world, but also having a greater sense of connection to family and friends. And I think, to also bring out a truthful version of myself and allow myself to be vulnerable. I was surrounded by people that I love and would also call me on moments when I wasn't being truthful.
That scene in this episode when you see your wife, now that you have distance from in the gray, the age suit, now that you have distance from it, how do you look back on that moment? How do you remember it?
As I described it there, I had no idea what I was doing. Every day was a unique experience and something that was pretty overwhelming in a variety of ways. And I didn't know who it was, and then I touched her on the shoulder and I knew instantly. And I felt her vulnerability at that time. And look, I'm sort of repeating what was in there, but there was something simple about it, and also complex and beautiful, and made me think about the past, years we'd had together, and the future years we'd had together, and the need to soak up every moment. I thought, wow, if this was it, if this was the final days, that I'm not ready to go yet. I want more of this, and I want more connection.
It was beautiful. Arif Nur Mohammed, you're one of the producing partners. You've done a number of NatGeo events with like Will Smith and others. What were some of the technical challenges? Because there were so many sweeping, drone shots, all the things that just made it come to life. What were some of the most difficult technical challenges?
I think technically we wanted the this to feel as real for Chris as possible. So we went for a documentary approach. The reality is the hardest things technically, ultimately, were the things that you saw, for instance, in that episode where, you know, the old people in the retirement community, they were real people, they weren't actors, as the film said. And they were all in New South Wales, basically, because it was the time of COVID. So the team, one of the big technical challenges for the team at Utopia was, you know, going through casting we went through 500 people to find the 60 people who were in that community who would feel comfortable with this sort of surreality that we were building. And the technical challenges of working with vulnerable old people during the time of COVID, before, Chris, you remember, it was before the vaccines happened. So there was, you know, what you see there is a logistical, practical, and technical challenge, and that's more than kind of the drone shots and all that exciting stuff, which is kind of TV and film, but actually the willingness of those people to participate in this extraordinary experiment, as BJ described.
It was indeed a social experiment. BJ, Alua, you were breathtaking in this episode. Thank you so much. You're an attorney, you're a professor, you talk about going with grace. What, if anything, do you think you saw in watching Chris go through this experience that mirrors what you do as a death doula?
Courage, for starters, courage. The way that he walked toward all these challenges that we brought him, what was happening with his body, not knowing what the experience was about. At every step of the way, he surrendered to what was happening. And by force of nature, that's what happens when people are old and dying. The body's taking over and we have no choice, and so they must surrender. And Chris did it with such courage at every single turn, just hearing what was happening, adjusting to what was happening, and then going along with it. That's the best that we can ask for anybody while ill and while dying, and also while shooting a TV show and also making your dad.
Yeah. BJ, you know, it was mentioned that this is based on science from MIT, that this is clearly calibrated. What do you think you were able to get out in this social experiment that would be instructive for people?
Well, yeah, quite a lot of things, really. I mean, one is the sort of irony that, you know, the way to experience limitlessness is somehow through your limits. You know, this sort of idea, it's remarrying or marrying things that we hold as opposites. Vulnerability and strength, life and death. Those aren't opposites, they're really entwined. And across this episode, and maybe the whole series, you get a sense of this. And I think that's, for me, the huge takeaway. If we could all really internalize that truth, that bigger reality, then we don't have to be at odds with ourselves. And that's a very powerful place.
Everyone is so profound. It's really mind-blowing. Karen, we talk a lot about the power of storytelling. How powerful are these episodes? I mean, I've watched them. I had my children with me as we were watching them, and it's so accessible. What do you like about this particular format? They're all going to be dropped together, as we say in the business, so they can be binged tomorrow.
Well, the exciting thing for Protozoa has been to try to make science entertaining. So to get one of the greatest entertainers in the world to take the journey with us means that kid fans of this guy, as well as older people like me, are going to be able to sit during the holidays and watch this together as a family. I was thinking about this last episode and how it would play to families, especially with younger kids. But just a personal story, I lost both of my parents this year, and as I was losing my mom, I got an early cut of this, and I watched it on the couch with my dad next door to my mom while she was passing, and about halfway through I kind of paused and I was like, is this okay, Dad? Because there was a lot of heavy shit going on in it. And he was like, yeah, keep it going. And we watched it all the way through. We didn't really discuss it, but it was extremely helpful for me watching this and having your wisdom with me while I went through that process. So thank you guys for that.
where to go next. But Chris, you know, I wonder, there are so many sort of points of science and longevity that Peter's talked about, whether it's the fasting or the stress or the shock. What, if anything, day to day, practically, do you practice now based on this year-long experiment?
Look at a lot of things from heat exposure, sauna, ice baths, specific sort of training, nutritional habits, intermittent fasting. But the biggest one I feel like each one of the episodes made me realise was gratitude. You know, as I'd sort of overcome some crazy challenge or extreme sort of circumstances, like, oh, thank God I'm here, thank God I'm alive, thank God I'm complete that. But then also an appreciation for everything I have for this moment and the opportunity I've had to even be a part of this and interact with these people. That kept striking a chord with me.
There's a moment when you complete the rope climb, 100-foot rope climb, dangling over, you know, 1,000 feet. Somehow that didn't slip his mind.
That was a strength episode, and I was like, hey, well, this is a terrifying episode.
Yeah. But when you reach the top, I mean, it is a moment, that is not entertainment, that was real, that felt very real. What was going through your mind when that happened? I think Ross met you, right?
Thank God it was over. I had Ross at the top of the cable car just screaming at me. He's like, fight, keep going, big man, come on, big man.
Because for a big man, then you have to carry that weight up the rope. That is.
Well, initially the advice that Ross gave me was like, okay, we want to be as lean as possible. We want to be strong but lean, so don't put any weight on. And I was like, no, I'm shooting 4. You get bigger and bigger.
Thor's bulky.
And then by the time we came to shoot it, I was as big as I'd ever been, and he said, yeah, this is going to be a problem.
There's one thing I noticed in all the episodes, because so during the fasting episode, it kind of ends where he had to, I'll just give it away because it's coming out tomorrow, but he has to hunt for a fish and catch a fish, and when he caught the fish, he was so exhausted, he came to the surface and he wouldn't give me like a yeah or something at the surface, and I was like, damn, darn. And none of these, I'm just thinking through it now, you never gave at any of it until like the whole show was over at the final and the thing. But you never, when you touched the red buoy, you were sort of like,
hanging on by a thread. That's why I hadn't eaten in 4 days. I could barely lift my arm.
Dr. Askia, everyone in this audience wants to live longer, I think, safe to say. What do you think are the practical keys that come out in these challenges?
I think it really depends on what you're starting with, but I do think that of all the sort of things that we talk about, when we think about the sort of the tactics, behaviors, I think exercise is really just the most powerful drug we have, and that includes drugs. I mean, there is no intervention that I think is going to add years to your life and add quality at the end of life in terms of your physical body. And I was actually amazed at how robust some of the people were in the home there. You know, the guy was talking about how he still swims and still walks every day. And I don't think that's out of reach. Like, I mean, I think that, you know, we can be in our 80s and we can still be really robust. So I think that's one thing I would hope people take away from this is the importance of exercise throughout your life.
I want to add one other thing.
Please.
About the 6 shows, which is none of the interventions we're talking about are pharmacies. I mean, that was really important for us to look at behavior and you know, a universality of approach to what you can do. So the things that Chris is talking about are all things that we can do, you know, with medical advice in the case of cold showers, but you know, fundamentally you are all capable of doing this tomorrow, and it's not about ringing up your doctor, and that, with the exception of the Russian people, you know, I think that's really important to say. That was a guiding principle for us in creating this and crafting the show.
BJ, I just want to pick your brain one more time. We're closing fast on the end of our time here, but just wondering what, if anything, surprised you in this? If there were things that you felt or thought that were unexpected?
Well, I guess I was not expecting that folks in TV and film would dare to do this. I wasn't expecting that people would put these things together and roll with this. I wasn't expecting Chris to not act.
Mm.
I was very moved by all of it, and that was my great hope, was that for myself that I would actually be moved. I can't, engineer that, and I was moved, and that's the credit to all the people who made this thing happen, because it was quite a team.
That was brilliant. Thank you. One final question to Chris. I mean, you are an exceptional actor. We'll definitely say that. But I really got the sense that you were experiencing these challenges with an open heart, and that you really were feeling and thinking in real time. Tell me that that's true.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And that was probably the most daunting task. I'm used to hiding behind a character and diving into different storylines that have nothing to do with my world and having that space. And it's a lot more confronting. And that was part of the appeal to doing it, was as Ross always says, being comfortable with the uncomfortable. And yeah, it was a pretty special time.
And do you think you'll change your work-life balance? We want to see you on the screen repeatedly always.
I've retired.
Darren, last thoughts. What, if anything, is the big takeaway for you?
I guess it's such a crazy idea when it all started, and I'm incredibly grateful to all of these brilliant people. I really encourage you all to corner any one of these people. Don't go after that guy, go after those.
Absolutely.
Because they're just, it was a gift to have them along for the ride for me and Chris, to teach us and to learn from them. So I'm just very grateful to you guys for showing up to this, and for all you taught, both me and Chris and Arif and our teams through this process. Thank you guys.
Well, thank you all collectively and individually for sharing your wisdom. I want to take one more opportunity to buttonhole these folks. Please enjoy the reception. Thank you to Disney Plus for having us, and good evening.